You're adding a skilled receiver, you're adding depth, you're adding a guy that has an element of speed that we haven't had. You know, once we get him in here too and really see how we can use him, I think it can only be a great asset for us on offense to not only open up the field, but I think open up some other elements of the offense.
The Jacksonville Jaguars and Trevor Lawrence are entering a very pivotal 2024 season. Coming off of a disappointing 9-8 season a season ago, I really do think the Jags are one of the most disappointing teams in the league when you take into account what they did in 2022, having an amazing finish to the year and winning the AFC South for the first time in several years, hosting a playoff game, having a massive comeback against the Los Angeles Chargers to win their first playoff game in multiple years, and then in the divisional round go on the road into Arrowhead Stadium against the Kansas City Chiefs and actually put up a fairly good fight against the eventual Super Bowl champions. This past season was supposed to be yet another stepping stone for the Jaguars to eclipse, to continue to rise up the contender leaderboard. The final half of the season in 2022, Trevor Lawrence was finally starting to look like the generational prospect that we expected to see from him when he came out into the draft in 2021. And because of the way that the season ended for the Jags and Lawrence, I had him as my sleeper MVP pick, and I thought pretty highly of the Jags as a legit contender in the AFC. And through the midseason point, the Jags did look like a really good football team. They were 8-3 and were in the race for the number 1 seed with only 6 games to go, but that is when a 4-game losing streak ensued and the Jags would lose their last 5 of 6 games, with their only win coming against the Carolina Panthers, who are the worst team in the league. Now, to give the Jaguars a little bit of a break, they did suffer a handful of really key injuries. Trevor Lawrence was really banged up throughout the entire season, but really felt the bulk of those injuries towards the last half of the year. Christian Kirk, the go-to weapon and safety blanket for Trevor Lawrence, also got hurt in week number 13 against the Cincinnati Bengals. But regardless, the late season collapse left a lot to be desired for the Jaguars' 23 season. So they entered the spring months with a lot to accomplish to ensure that they would not feel this same level of disappointment. And the Jags actually spent a lot of money in free agency. Their biggest move, in my opinion, was going out and getting Eric Armstead from the San Francisco 49ers, giving him a 3-year, $51 million deal. The interior defensive line was probably the biggest weakness of the Jags defense last year. So getting Armstead, who is a great pass rushing presence from the interior, but can also be a solid run stopper as well, is going to be a great addition to the defense. You've got your 2 stud edge rushers and Josh Allen and Trayvon Walker, who combined for 27.5 sacks last year. They'll both be back next season. So getting in Armstead, you add a third viable threat on the defensive line. They also brought in another starting cornerback in Ronald Darby from the Baltimore Ravens. He's jumped around from team to team in the last few years, but I still think he is a solid option at your second boundary corner. So now pairing him up with Tyson Campbell, the Jags should have a fairly solid cornerback duo in 2024. And the last major free agent signing on the defensive side of the ball was getting safety Darnell Savage from the Green Bay Packers. The Jags needed a replacement for longtime veteran Rayshawn Jenkins, and Savage is a guy that is in the prime of his career, only 26 years old, and he was a fairly good playmaker for the Packers as well, intercepting 9 passes in 5 seasons. I am interested to see where Savage is going to be playing majority of his snaps. Andre Cisco is the current safety for this team. He's been a really good player, but he's entering the final year of his rookie deal, and the Jaguars have not extended him yet. And the only other guy I could see starting is Antonio Johnson, but I don't know if the second-year player is ready to be a full-time starter as well. So maybe Ryan Nielsen, the team's new defensive coordinator, decides to use all 3 of them in a specific role. But nonetheless, the Jags add another playmaker to the back end of their defense. Offensively, the Jags added a couple of Buffalo Bills. Wide receiver Gabe Davis on a 3-year, $39 million contract. He will likely be the deep threat for the Jags. It's kind of his specialty, as a guy that can get behind the defense, make some good plays down the field. And then center Mitch Morse on a fairly cheap contract, a 2-year, $10.5 million deal. Morris is a little bit older at 31 years old, but is still playing at a fairly high level, including a Pro Bowl that he made in 2022. And signing Morris solidified their offensive line and really made it one of the best in the league in terms of just on paper. Cam Robinson at left tackle, Ezra Cleveland, who they re-signed at left guard, Morris at center, Brandon Sheriff at right guard, and then their second-year player, Anton Harrison, at right tackle. And because of those key veteran signings at positions of need, the Jaguars went into the draft really being able to go any direction. And after trading back 6 selections with the Minnesota Vikings and picking up a 3rd and 4th round pick in 2025, the Jags selected Brian Thomas Jr. out of LSU LSU to be the new wide receiver 1 for the team. And Thomas was one of my favorite wide receivers in this draft class just due to his amazing size at 6'3", 210 pounds, and still being able to run a 4.33 40-yard dash. He's somebody that Trevor Lawrence can throw 50-50 balls to and also be a big red zone target, while also being yet another deep threat to combine with Gabe Davis as two guys that can really stretch the field. Thomas had 10 touchdown catches on go or fade routes last season, which was the second most in the FBS. And you add Brian Thomas Jr. into an offense that already has Christian Kirk, Gabe Davis, Travis Etienne, and Evan Ingram. And that's a big addition for Trevor Lawrence and the Jaguars offense that needs to be better next season. And we got our first look at Thomas Jr. and his connection with Trevor Lawrence so far in Jaguars OTAs. And I think the first couple of things that jump off the screen immediately is his size and his speed. It is not common to see wide receivers his size be able to move that freely while also being able to get in and out of breaks so quickly. That was one thing that people had a question about Brian Thomas's game, how he would be able to develop as a route runner at the NFL level, because at LSU, he did not have a super extensive route tree. Most of the times he was just asked, hey, just run down the field and Jaden Daniels will find you with a go ball. It's a little bit more complex than that in the NFL. He's going to have to be a lot more diverse with what he runs game in and game out. But the early signs of how he's running in Jaguars camp, his sudden movement, his ability to stop and start, I do think that's a positive sign in terms of him being able to develop as a route runner and actually become a fairly good one. But I think Thomas's connection with Trevor Lawrence is really going to be the thing that makes or breaks the Jaguars season next year. Calvin really was supposed to be the one that took Trevor Lawrence's game to the next level. And it just felt like last year they were not really on the same page a lot. Ridley would have some key drops. Lawrence would miss some here or there on key moments as well. And things just never really seemed in sync consistently. The Jags offense really struggled in the red zone last year. They only averaged 22.2 points per game, which was 15th in the league. And that is just simply not going to get it done, especially when your defense is ranked 16th in points per game allowed. And with Trevor Lawrence entering year number 4, it's really time for him to show that he is that generational prospect that he was touted to be. We've seen flashes of his tremendous talent and the ability to make off-platform throws, fit balls into tight windows, make people miss in the open field, and have excellent mobility. But in terms of limiting mistakes and also just being a consistent player game in and game out, that is what is missing with Trevor Lawrence at this point. And the hope is that Brian Thomas Jr. could be the one to really get him past that point. I mean, one of the biggest topics of discussion right now in the NFL is if the Jaguars should pay Trevor Lawrence a lucrative contract extension. I personally believe that the Jaguars should probably wait it out. They still have him this year under contract. They still have him on the 5th-year option next year. And then even after that, they could franchise tag him if they really needed to for another 2 seasons. So in my opinion, they should not be in any rush to pay him. I know Trent Baalke is probably looking at it like, hey, we want to get this deal done before all the other quarterbacks get paid and Trevor Lawrence's price continues to go up. But the way I view things is you would rather overpay for something that you know is worth the investment than slightly underpay for something that you still have no clue if it is worth the amount of money you're going to put into it. So if I'm the Jaguars, I look at what I did for Lawrence this offseason, stabilizing the offensive line, bringing in 2 new weapons, including a first-round pick at wide receiver who's going to be a stud. It will be Lawrence's 3rd year in the offense. He will come back fully healthy after all of his banged-up injuries this past year. There's really no excuses for Lawrence to not have a great season next year and even get the Jaguars into the playoffs. I personally think the AFC South is going to be really competitive next year with all the moves the Texans and the Titans made. Anthony Richardson coming back healthy in year 2 with Shane Steichen for the Colts. It's going to be an absolute war, and I'm super excited to watch this division that's really been one of the worst in the league in recent memory. It's now quickly become one of the more competitive divisions in all of football. So if I'm the Jags organization, I'm just saying, hey, Trevor Lawrence, go win us this division, go win us a playoff game, show us that you are worth making $50+ million a year and you can become an elite quarterback. But Brian Thomas Jr. will be a huge factor if Trevor Lawrence can take that next step and if the Jags can be a true playoff threat next year. And so far in OTAs, it does look like he's up for the task. But I want to know what you think about Brian Thomas Jr. and what you expect from the Jacksonville Jaguars in 2024. Do you think this team has what it takes to make some noise in the AFC next year, or do you still think they're a few players away until they're able to do so? Let me know what you think in the comment section down below. But subscribe to the channel if you are new, drop a like on the video if you did enjoy it, and as always, thank you so much for watching, and I'll catch you guys in my next one.